Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to talk about false prophets and atheists and irreligious who inveigle and seduce weak people to leave the faith. Now, before we begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancto, sic ut erat in principio et nunc et semper et saecula saeculorum. Amen. All right, so we know this happens. We did an episode not that long ago about how to deal with atheists. And how do most atheists and agnostics become atheists and agnostics? Because they were encountered or approached by either a person, or they stumbled upon a website or a blog, which was of course written by a person, that seduced them, a false prophet, as we would say. And early in my channel, I did a treatment on every book in the New Testament, and I also did a video. I'll put a playlist banner up here on it. And I also did a video on the 5 themes running through New Testament epistles, and one of them is Paul, Peter, John. They're all talking about watch out for false prophets and false teachers that can take you away from the orthodox teachings of the apostles, of the apostolic tradition that we got from the apostles and their successors. And you can exegete that out or look at it strictly as, well, you could read that as Protestants who have taken the historical deposit of faith that we had for 1,500 years, and then someone like Luther misexegete the Bible. And look, he had a hermeneutic. He admitted he had a hermeneutic. He and Calvin both didn't believe that anybody should just read the Bible and come up with their own theology. They wanted you to follow their theology. But no doubt, I mean, you could say that some of the Protestant progenitors were false prophets. Of course, Protestants would disagree because they would think that they were liberating people from the corruption and venality of the church and of the Catholic Church and all the accretions that were developing since the time of Christ, to bring it back to a more primitive church. And we have episodes in refuting all of these things. But I did want to go to 2 Timothy 3, because this has always spoken to me, because unfortunately I know people who've been inveigled by people like this. For men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, inhuman, implacable, slanderers, profligates. That's a fancy word for you spend too much money. Fierce, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding the form of religion but denying the power of it. And this is 2 Timothy. This is Paul writing this. Avoid such people, for among them are those who make their way into households and capture weak women, burdened with sins and swayed by various impulses, who will listen to anybody and can never arrive at the knowledge of the truth. That's 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 through 8. And I mean, how appropriate is this? Now, if you look at this, Paul's really talking about godlessness in the last days, about how these false prophets will come and take people away. And we know that if you look at end times ideas that are in Revelation in particular, we know that there is going to be a false prophet and Antichrist, and there are going to be people that identify themselves as followers of Jesus that will turn away and apostatize by listening to the message of these types of people. But I like to apply this to today, to people I know today. And how many people do you know? And again, it doesn't have to be women. You can say, again, be men. All these, the person that they encounter, right? Lover of money, proud, arrogant, ungrateful, slanderers, profligates, haters of good, treacherous, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure. Avoid them, for they'll make their way into your house and capture weak women. You could apply weak men in this case as well. Burdened with sins and swayed by various impulses. Right, so at some point, we are all dealing with sin. I've admitted here that I was not chaste when I got married. I mean, I have fornicated. And so we've all had the first half of the prodigal son, so to speak, parable of our life. In lots of times we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable to these types of what I would call antichrist messages, because really the term antichrist just means a message or a person that's contrary to the teachings of Christ and his church. So we've all been exposed at vulnerable and weak moments in our life to these kinds of messages. And when we're mired in sin, it's just so much easier to indulge in the sin. And this is why virtue is a habit. And the more credit, so to speak, we build up on virtue, the more impervious we are to the sin. We're always going to be tempted by the sins of concupiscence, of course. But as we build up credit, it makes us stronger. So if you can do your daily prayer, do your rosary, go to daily mass, stay in a state of grace, receive the Eucharist as much as you can, it kind of builds you up. And it's the converse too, where if you're not doing these things and you're just, and we've all been there, right? Oh, I had a pint of ice cream, I feel bad, I'm gonna eat 2 pints. Or, oh, I had two drinks, oh, what the heck, I got nothing to lose. We've all kind of had that self-piteous, negative kind of self-destructive view, and then we just get mired in it, right? You see this with benders, guys who drink a lot, and other people. And this is the same thing. So we're all in a vulnerable situation. The goal is not to fall into that. The goal is to protect yourself from false prophets. And, as it's mentioned, the devil doesn't come as an angel of light. The devil does come as an angel of light. He's not going to come with a pitchfork and spiky horns on his head, right? So lots of times we don't identify the false prophet. We actually think the false prophets who lead us down to road of losing our faith, we see them as a Messiah, so to speak, or someone who's freeing me from the hocus pocus of religion, and they offer you this life that you think is better. And especially if you come from a life where maybe you didn't have a grounded faith, or maybe you came from a cult religion or whatever it is, and then you see this guy, like the guy who pushes Dorian Gray in Oscar Wilde's seminal novel, who tells him, smoke the opium, indulge in alcohol, indulge in gambling. And so you're, of course, as a human, are going to be tempted to do these things. And at the time, you don't realize this is leading to your own corruption and your own dissolution and endangering your soul. You think it's freeing. You think it's liberating. You think it's great. So the goal is surround yourself with godly people. We are judged by the company we keep. And then know your faith, know yourself well enough to that when you do encounter these people, when you're in a moment of weakness, in sin, or just a moment of weakness, you can identify them as being false prophets. You can identify them as being ambassadors of essentially the devil. Because if they're pushing the works of the flesh in Galatians, and the things that are mentioned here in 2 Timothy, right? Carousing, sexual immorality, drunkenness, open up your sexual life, polygamy, whatever it is. You don't need to go to church. You don't need to pray. You need to be able to identify that and discern that. And this is what we also have to teach into our children who don't have wisdom. So certainly if you're in your 30s, you should not be susceptible to these kind of lies, because you should have wisdom. But either way, we know a lot of people in their 30s and 40s who are in a vulnerable moment. They encounter a false prophet like this and they indulge. And lots of times they don't come back. Lots of times they believe the lie that their life is better living a life of corruption and living a life without God. And we know that is not true, because a life with God is a much better life. And not even to talk about the eschaton and end times when you die. Oh, if you're not in a state of grace, you'll go to hell, because that's not really a good answer to give atheists, because they don't even believe in hell. And they think, oh, you like God because you're scared of God. No. Corrupting the body in itself is negative. In itself doesn't lead to happiness, right? We think it does. It's a ephemeral thing. Oh, indulging in all these sensual pleasures and concupiscence, it's great, it's liberating, but ultimately once you've had it, it's like a fat kid in a candy store. It ultimately isn't redeeming. So check out 2 Timothy chapter 3 about watch out for false prophets that seduce weak people. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Hit the notification, subscribe, and share button. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.